Good morning, world. Another No Rocket Ships episode with me, your host, Jamie Hancox, and my guest today, the wonderful Tomas Krag. Thomas, introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for having me. I'm Tomas Krag. I am currently the CTO at Hobby. I am come from the tech side of digital. I've worked with digital since the late 90s and for the last 15 years in e-commerce. Um, I think that's the short version of it.
Okay, and I'm going to just slightly flatter you by saying, well, I'm not. I'm going to apologize because when I ran Mac One many years ago, and I think I was trying to avoid getting you on stage because you were actually on gardening leave at the time. And then you happened to, and then I needed you, and you came and helped, and you were bloody brilliant, and I was very grateful. And then we've been we've been friends ever since. So, firstly,
Yeah.
sorry for not wanting you on stage, and then thank you for just a little thank you. But that's a long time ago. That's what, 6 years ago. I'm doing my
It is, yeah.
seventh Mac conference now. So, and in terms of brands, you were at B&O, you were Bang& Olufsen before I met you, and then you were doing beds for a while.
Yes, I was at Hilding Anas doing in the bed industry for a brief stint, trying to do direct to consumer e-commerce there, which
And you've been
ended
on
quite quickly.
And you've been on agency side at least a couple of times that I know of.
Yes. Yes, I was most recently I was the CTO in the Danish department of No Ignite, and before I was at Bang& Olufsen, I was at a couple of e-commerce agencies. So, Danish agency called Cruzo, and before that at then Digitas LBI that became Sapient.
So we're going to talk about three things broadly. We're going to talk about the SaaS apocalypse, which should be fun. We're going to talk about Mac because I think you have opinions, and we probably both do. And I'm going to ask you a horrible question at some point, which is, where are we going to be in 5 years' time? Which I think you're probably going to avoid. But let's talk about the apocalypse, right? So Hobbies on. Tell me a little about sort of turnover and tech stack at Hobby and kind of where you think the apocalypse is at.
Yeah. So Hobby is a online yarn retailer. We are an omnichannel. We have stores in Denmark and Germany, but primarily online yarn retailer at 75, 80 million euros revenue. Our stack. So we moved from essentially a home built, open source, open cart PHP Laravel stack. And when I came in last summer, we moved to Shopify after a longer migration period. So we're now on Shopify Plus. We operate in all of Europe and North America, so quite a significant number of markets with a combination of the classic Shopify Plus combination of having Shopify markets in some areas and independent instances in others. We run on our ERP stack is the open source Odoo platform. So around Shopify, we have that. We run our own warehouse in Denmark, so we have our own auto store integration and more or less home built warehouse management system.
And where do we stand on the apocalypse?
Where do we stand on the apocalypse? So I mean, just to sort of briefly frame it, what we're seeing happening, of course, is that companies with the help of AI are building functionality themselves. So we're kind of in an interesting place, having gone from having built mostly everything ourselves, almost drowned in complexity, then switched to a much more standardized software set up with Shopify and around Shopify with more SaaS. And now are seeing this sort of AI move where a lot of companies are sort of looking at, a SaaS offering and saying, well, we only need 20% of this. We can build that ourselves. I'm probably sort of a little bit torn in the sense that I think it's likely to become more of a SaaS transformation than a SaaS apocalypse. And in some ways, I'm an old sort of Unix, Linux hand from way back in the 90s, and sort of the Unix statement was always the philosophy was always write programs that do one thing and do it well, and write programs to work together. And that's sort of so on Unix, you sort of have these little utilities that you can string together and make work. And in some ways, I think maybe that's what we're moving towards. That I think the current SaaS, the SaaS drive that over the last I don't know, almost my entire career has been put more and more features into it. So, everything needed to be a content management system, and everything needed to be email marketing. So you just sort of expand the functionality of your offering until it did everything. And that's not how most companies want to buy software. So with this, I think maybe there's a counter reaction. The, the slightly what we don't talk about enough is when you build things yourself, you also have to maintain them yourselves. And in many ways, my rule of thumb is it's only 20% of the investment that is in building software in-house. The 80% comes maintaining it over time, because software lives for a long time in-house. So I think there's sort of I hope in many ways that we're headed towards smaller specialized systems that we can still buy as SaaS and get SLAs around and all that stuff.
Maybe that will be supported by the fact that I think the sort of the feature sweetness, the over featureness of everything has been created by a VC marketplace that wanted you to scale in every way in order for you to win more customers, have more features, and eventually exit. These companies won't get that kind of investment now in SaaS because the money's already somewhere else in AI. And so they'll probably have to trade as profitable businesses now, and therefore, they'll have to be kind of normal businesses where they make money and sell software and do a better job. I don't know. I'm always looking for always looking for everybody to win. What do you think?
I know. I think that's absolutely. I mean, I think there are different areas of SaaS. So I think for sort of internal tools, we've had the conversation internally now about whether we would ever buy another sort of purely internal piece of SaaS software that doesn't hit our customers. And I don't know the answer yet, but potentially, unless prices fall in that market, we could build things a lot cheaper. I think when you touch on email marketing, so whether it's e-commerce platforms or email marketing platforms, there's just a lot of complexity and compliance and risk that a company needs to take. And so I think there's definitely room for SaaS companies to find markets there, to continue finding markets there, where it's just easier for us as sort of buyers to buy a piece of software.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation, you're part of the Commerce Features crew, and there's definitely that, the BI layer is definitely something that everybody seems to be going after and saying, yeah, we're gonna go and build this because that's very expensive to buy and we're not really using all of it and the business doesn't really want it anyway. And yeah, is there anything
Yeah.
else that's sort of obvious? What about middleware?
So what?
What about middleware? What about that
Oh,
sort of?
yeah. So I think that I mean, again, I think where we're seeing sort of things change is I think there are certain types of software. So I think it's a good point that BI is one of them, but there's also things like, our PIM is actually Sanity, which is I mean, to some degree a content management system, but really almost a developer framework. It's such an open development platform for content, and I think those types of platforms that have that developer flexibility that have maybe previously been considered quite complex, they have a space in the market because with AI you can now take that complexity out of, accelerate the building, but you still get a stable foundation and a structure to build on top of. And I think it's a little bit the same with BI. So we're going in the direction of taking our visualization and moving it onto Metabase, which is an open source visualization tool, so free. And I think we've made that choice instead of building things from scratch because there's a set of proven tools, a set of proven widgets. We don't have to rethink the UI. Like you just get a lot out of the box. But you get all the advantages of building something yourself because you have the control with it. So I think there's sort of places we can go on where there's room in the market for these things. And middleware is interesting because I think this is like this conversation somehow ties into the Mac conversation as well, because what happens when you get a lot, like one of the challenges of Mac was this idea that you wanted to be able to get best of breed, which is exactly what I'm saying now. If each piece of SaaS does less in a narrower sense, you're tying more pieces together. And this was the challenge that I think, at least in the early days, Mac ran into hard, which was you would just be you just have this increasingly complex middleware layer that nobody really knew how to handle, and that then became sort of the limitation. And I do see sort of an opportunity for AI to help us there as well, because the ability to generate documentation, the ability to handle complex APIs is increased when you have a little assistant called Claude.
I had forgotten that you're using Sanity as a PIM,
Mm,
which is funny in all sorts of ways, especially to the non-technical person in the
yes,
conversation. Me, I know the Sanity guy as well as being pretty much the best CMS out there. That's what everybody has always said. But it's interesting that you've said it's yes, and also everything's a CMS, right? But equally
yes.
the idea that it's just a really well written piece of software that you can pivot to become all sorts of other things. That's interesting.
And I think I mean, the irony is even bigger. Like 2.5 years ago, when I was at Noah Ignite on the agency side, we held an event together with Sanity about using Sanity as a PIM, and showed off some cases, and we were all like, okay, this is kind of edgy. Q 2 years later, I switched to an e-commerce company that actually has that implementation, which in an unrelated fashion. I mean, I think there's a point there in the sense that we're sort of entering a future where everything is content, and everything is a database, in the sense that AIs turn out to be very, very good at text, and everything you want is essentially input output in text, and transforming one form of text to another has changed, like has become much easier. So this idea that you can use like in some ways, the difference between a PIM and a content management system is that the PIM has very specific UI elements made for bulk editing large amounts of data. But in sort of an AI world, you can pretty quickly get those elements up. And again, I'm not making the argument that we wouldn't have other advantages if we had Bluestone or a modern PIM there instead. But it is changing the feasibility of these things, I think.
And talk to me about Mac then. There was a period, I think, when Mac was a religious cult.
Yes.
I think I probably looked like I was in the cult, but you know me
Yeah,
well
me,
enough to
me
know
too.
that. We were in the, and then it wasn't right. I mean, I've remained involved, sort of on the edges. I obviously run the conferences, and I really enjoy doing it, and I love the people there, and they're the people who are involved are great. But it sort of became a little bit weird for a few years, didn't it?
Yeah.
It talk to me about because technology is so gossipy. That's almost, I think it fell victim to a large amount of bad gossip for a while, some of which was entirely true.
Yeah. I think there's definitely sort of uh, so I just from sort of a background perspective, I think this when I started at Bang& Olufsen, I started because we were relaunching the entire sort of e-commerce platform, and we made the decision back then to do a composable. I think this was before the term Mac existed, so we were sort of one of the early adopters of commerce tools and that whole way of thinking and working and contentful. Um, and with the argument of basically being, to be able to step off the replatforming treadmill, and saying, we've all been, especially uh, people at our age, we've all been through this digital world where every 5, 6, 7 years, all development stops because you spend a year and a half replatforming because whatever it is you built it on wasn't working anymore. And so I think that was the sort of initial, at least for us, the sort of first step to say we don't ever want to have to replatform the full stack again. So we're going to split it up into components, use APIs, use headless, and have a little bit more freedom. And then to your point on the gossip, I think what happens in that scenario is each individual company takes on a lot more responsibility for their own stack than if you're just, a Salesforce company or a Sitecore company or a Optimizely company, where you're leaning on a vendor that's supposed to do the brunt the brunt of the work here, and now you're taking on that responsibility, which then also means, when it inevitably goes wrong for some companies, it's a very different dynamic, because digital implementations and transformations have gone wrong on big platforms as well. It's just that's a different I was sat through, I think it was Sitecore 9 that just was a complete nightmare for every agency because it just didn't do what it was supposed to do, and burnt thousands of hours of it and on it. But then you were just pointing your finger in one place. One of the challenges of Mac is you're sort of having to point your finger inwards and say, okay, we did this, and this is our responsibility. And then I guess in that case, not blaming a vendor but blaming the methodology is an easy gossipy way out, just saying no, it doesn't work. I don't know how much of that is true, but I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So you're blaming the client, which is very good of you to a degree. Whereas I suppose I would always, I was, I think Commerce Tools hired the wrong agencies to implement the big deals that they were winning, and those big agencies did a really bad job because they were learning on the client's money and they didn't seem to mind, and the reputation of the agency and Commerce Tools, and therefore Mac was kind of was affected.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you're right. The agency, I mean, when I say I blame the clients, like it's to me, it's the agencies and the clients working together in a sense. And I don't, I mean, blame is the wrong word. I don't think anything went more wrong with Mac than with traditional implementations because, as I said, I've seen so many failed implementations. I mean, I've lived off them on the agency side, taking over other agencies' failed implementations on big platforms. And to be honest, been on the other side of that and handed over clients to other agencies after we've messed them up. Typically then you have a platform that did something that broke it to blame. I think it's more of that sort of the what do you do in that situation when you can't point your finger at a platform? You sort of architected it, and as you said, you're learning on the job. And I think there's a tendency, especially for these big implementations that Commerce Tools was leading with the big agencies, to over-engineer things. Like you're really trying to solve too many things at the same time because that promise is so tantalizing. That you're sort of maybe you chase it too hard. Whereas to me, Mac was always meant to be something you could do gradually, step by step, and sort of say, let's take out this element and put in, make sure we have APIs there and move gradually towards something that was more loosely coupled.
yes, that whole idea of building your own pods, which Commerce Tools salespeople were throwing around
Uh,
for at least 2 or 3 years,
uh,
and that's
uh,
you can't even think, don't even nobody should be thinking about doing that. Just so we're clear.
No, and that's the tie back to the SaaS apocalypse in the sense that I don't think it makes sense. Like now we have with AI the capability of building everything ourselves. That doesn't mean it makes sense because some of these things are actually hard. Like I don't we're migrating to Klaviyo for email marketing as we speak. I don't want to build that. Like I don't want to be responsible for email deliverability and the complexities of sending 500 million emails a year. Like this is not fun. And I think the same goes for Shopify. Like I don't want to be responsible for building checkout from scratch, which is the other thing that Commerce Tools was sort of also on the other side of e-commerce. They were like, yeah, but you can just build your own checkout. I'm like, yeah, but you shouldn't. Like for most companies, I mean, I get that there's outliers and if you're big enough, you might want to, but in most cases, you just shouldn't.
And while we're talking about Shopify checkout, again, we both watched the WhatsApp chat that the Common Futures group, and it does seem to me that in these more complex Shopify implementations, the clients are starting to really struggle with this idea of more than one storefront markets. That thing that Shopify sort of made go away a few years
Mm.
ago. Is it fair to say that they sort of fudged the international thing really, and it's not, I don't know. Give me a kind of a normal view.
I mean, I think that's probably being harsh in the sense that I think Shopify, like that, these things are difficult. This is complex stuff with international currency conversion and all of this stuff. And I think the same way that I wouldn't blame a local payment provider for not supporting everything I need. I don't. I think they have very very good solutions for most problems those solutions just don't fit every company, which I think is, I mean, back to why Mac was such a tantalizing proposition in the first place is you wanted something that you could customize, and you can with Shopify, but there are use cases that I think hit European companies more, of course, because we just have more currencies and more markets and quicker. So Shopify Markets works well, but you have problems with the way the financial processing of different currencies, and then you end up in these setups that we have, for example, which is essentially 9 instances of Shopify, some of which include markets. So we do run multiple markets, but it's, I mean, we don't want to take the cost of using Shopify's internal currency conversion as an example. Like these are the finer details of calculating TCO. So I mean, is there like is, I think Shopify has always had this heritage of being North American, and we've seen this with a lot of North American software. Like this has been a sort of ongoing thing in my career in sort of Scandinavian agencies, is that every time you ended up using North American software, there were always problems with internationalization and localization, because I mean, you get to the GMV you get to at in the US on one language and one market and one currency. In Europe, if you're a Danish company, you're going international sort of on day 2, because otherwise, there's no business plan.
Okay.
So I think that the problems are real, but I don't know that they're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm also saying this because I haven't seen anyone else solve them, particularly well. So,
You're
um,
such a calm and kind and balanced person.
no, but I mean, I think that I think what also goes a little bit under the radar is that Shopify is not a piece of software. Like Shopify Payments and Shop Pay and Shopify as an e-commerce platform are 3 different things, and I think a lot of these problems come from us, like us being, like us as clients being forced to use Shopify Payments. So if I was, if I want to be harsh on Shopify, it's their sort of business model of essentially forcing Shopify Payments onto all of us by giving us a lovely, fraction of a percent of a fee if you want to use any other payment system than theirs, and that is challenging, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, last question. Where are we going to be in, I don't know, choose your time frame, right? Have you got any confidence in where this is going to land in a couple of years or 5 years, or where are we going to be in terms of the digital stack? Is it going to change dramatically in the next 5 years? And if so, where do you think it'll really change?
Yeah. So I probably lean on the side of it changing less than we think, in the sense that I think we'll still I from even despite a SaaS apocalypse, I think we'll still be buying e-commerce platforms. We'll still be buying email marketing solutions. Back to the point before, like we don't, as individual companies, want to take on that responsibility for everything. It's just not a viable model, whether or not you have AI. I do. I mean, I do think that there's going to be immense price pressure on the SaaS world because of this. Because what I think happens now is the path to starting your own competitor is much shorter. So like I think my concern would probably be that one of the things AI is accelerating is we're just going to get more and more of the same types of systems in the market, which that acceleration that we've seen in our lifetime, where as a marketing technologist you're up to, I remember the first time the map from Brinker came out. I don't know if it was 3,000 pieces of software. What is it now? 60,000, and that's going to get to 60 million. It's just going to be, to me, that part is just insane. Um,
And therefore, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the reasons why these communities like mine exist is because everybody's fighting harder to keep up with whatever's coming. And, there's a shared group of people that go, well, I'm using this, I'm trying that. And, that didn't happen very easily a few years ago. So you think that'll just get bigger? I sort of had in mind that people would start falling off, but maybe they won't fall off at the same rate as everybody else arrives. Are you still seeing a huge arrival of stuff?
I absolutely. And because it's become so easy to build some of this stuff, I think there's more and more coming. And the flip side argument becomes, if you cross a line where it becomes so impossible to keep up, maybe people are just going to be like, well, I'll just get Shopify then and be done with it. And the big platforms are gonna live off that, because they have uh, the marketing money. I Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, at the same time, we're sort of seeing the whole e-commerce industry being under super amounts of pressure because their margins are so the pressure to do the same things cheaper is significant.
And of course, my sort of epiphany last summer was, hang on, we've all spent billions and billions and billions on ecom for 20 years, and it's only really got 15 to 20% of the market. 80% of the market is still in physical retail, and that's starting to sort of slightly recover as people actually spend some money on it and try and fix some of the crappy service models and some of the crappy staffing. I'm so as I do my research for Let's Go Shopping, I look at the fact that footfall might be slightly down, but dwell time's up. So people are doing a better job in store than they were, and the margin, you haven't got to pay Google. So
Uh, No, and then it turns out that having your brand on the high street is actually probably a pretty good traffic generator as well. I mean, I mean, no, but I mean, it is sort of, getting those eyeballs. Maybe we've crowded grabbing attention. We're competing so much for attention online, and there's been less focus on that same attention in the real world, and maybe, that just makes that the economics change. It's easier to get attention now.
yes, and there was I watched I think Only Curls, the Only Curls hair care brand in the UK. They've just spent some money on outdoor up in Manchester and have got some really interesting results as out of it. I honestly don't even care whether it really works. It's just nice
Yeah,
to see somebody doing something that isn't 500 pieces of creative on social media and paying Mark Zuckerberg some more money. It's just lovely
yeah,
to.
exactly. No, no, I mean, that doesn't mean that the sort of influencer marketing stuff is not going away anytime soon, but there is definitely sort of an opening. As CAC just keeps on increasing and organic keeps on getting harder, yeah, maybe, we should all be making more stores.
Okay. Well, so thank you very much, sir. I will be back in touch with you to persuade you to come to Amsterdam and speak at MACH, which might be sort of ironic and happy all at the same time.
Consider me persuaded, Jamie. Consider me persuaded.
But thank you, Thomas. It's been
Thank
great,
you very much.
great talking to you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.